I died at 32 in a car accident on the way to sign divorce papers. I'd finally worked up the courage to file. I opened my eyes at 24, the morning after my wedding to Marcus Chen, with 8 years of memories burning in my skull like a brand. My face was pressed against the scratchy pillowcase of a Hilton hotel bed. Marcus was already in the shower, and through the bathroom door, I could hear him on the phone with his mother. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. No, she didn't suspect anything about the prenup revisions. My lawyer said the version she signed is airtight. If we divorce, she gets nothing from the business appreciation. Even if my company goes public like we're planning, she'll only get what it was worth on our wedding day. Basically pocket change. I lay perfectly still. In my first life, I'd discovered this conversation accidentally when I found the phone records 2 years into our marriage. By then, it was too late. But now I had a gift. I had lived this life once already. I knew every betrayal, every humiliation, every carefully laid trap that Marcus and his family had set for me. I knew that Marcus married me because his company needed my father's manufacturing connections. I knew he'd drain those connections dry, then discard me. I knew his mother, Patricia, would make my life a living hell while extracting free interior design work from me. I'd built my business redesigning their entire real estate portfolio for exposure. I knew Marcus was already sleeping with his assistant, Kara, and would be for our entire marriage. I knew that in 6 months, Marcus would convince me to invest my inheritance, $200,000 from my grandmother, into a joint investment opportunity. He'd put it into his company, get me to sign documents I didn't read carefully, and I'd never see that money again. When I'd finally filed for divorce at 31, I'd gotten $12,000 from our marriage. $12,000 for 8 years of my life. But most importantly, I knew about the timeshare. Marcus padded out of the bathroom with a towel around his waist. Morning, babe. Sleep well? I stretched and smiled, making my voice soft and adoring, exactly as I'd been in my first life. Like a dream. I can't believe we're actually married. Best decision I ever made. He kissed my forehead with all the warmth of a business handshake. Listen, I've been thinking. For our 1-month anniversary, what if we took a trip? There's this presentation I need to attend in Orlando anyway. We could make a weekend of it. In my first life, I'd been so excited. A romantic getaway. I'd ignored all the red flags. That it was centered around his work obligation, that we'd be sitting through a timeshare presentation, that Marcus had seemed far too eager. That sounds amazing, I said, injecting exactly the right amount of enthusiasm into my voice. Perfect. There's just one small thing. We have to sit through a timeshare presentation to get the discounted hotel rate. But it's totally not a big deal. We'll just say no and get our free weekend. I played my part perfectly. The naive young bride who trusted her husband completely. Of course. That's so smart, saving money like that. Marcus grinned. In my first life, I hadn't seen the calculation in that smile. Now I saw nothing else. The next month passed in a horrible parody of my first life. I played the role of devoted wife while watching Marcus play the role of decent husband. We attended his company events where I smiled and charmed his business partners, leveraging my father's reputation to open doors Marcus couldn't open himself. I watched him flirt with Kara at the office when he thought I wasn't looking. I had dinner with Patricia and listened to her backhanded compliments about my quaint little design business. Of course, interior design is more of a hobby than a real career, Patricia said, sipping her wine at an exquisitely decorated restaurant. I'd designed it 2 years ago in my first life, for free, for her friend's restaurant. Not like Marcus's tech company. That's real business. I smiled and nodded, remembering how these words had once cut me. Now they just confirmed what I already knew. Patricia saw me as a temporary acquisition, useful for my connections and my free labor, disposable once they'd extracted everything of value. You're so right, Patricia, I said sweetly. I'm just grateful Marcus sees potential in me. She patted my hand with all the condescension of a queen addressing a peasant. Well, you're very lucky. My son could have married anyone. But he married me, I thought, because he needed my father's manufacturing connections to get his components made at cost. And in 2 years, once he's established those relationships directly, he won't need me anymore. I knew the pattern. I'd lived it. And this time, I was going to rewrite the ending. Orlando in
Fell
July
asleep
was a
during What
swamp.
was your first concert?
We arrived at the resort on a Friday afternoon, and
everyone
Marcus
get their
was
Noah cards?
immediately
Because
on
yeah,
his
I
phone
don't
with work.
like him all that
Our room
much.
was
I'm
nice.
sorry.
The free weekend
I don't
package was
really
actually
like him.
quite generous, but Marcus barely noticed. He was too busy texting. Sorry, babe. Crisis at work. I need to take this call. Why don't you go explore the resort? I'd seen the text preview over his shoulder. It was Kara sending him a photo. In my first life, I'd been too trusting to even consider he might be cheating. I'd actually felt guilty for being needy when I asked for his attention. No problem, I said. Take your time. That evening, we sat through the timeshare presentation. The salesman, Randy, was a pro. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. The conference room was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an artificial beach, reclaimed wood paneling, and a presentation packet that probably cost more than my wedding dress. Folks, what we're offering here is more than ease. Timeshare. It's a lifestyle investment. Imagine, every year, guaranteed vacation time at premium resorts across the globe. No more scrambling for hotels, no more overpriced tourist traps. You're buying into a family of properties. In my first life, I'd been bored. I'd zoned out, thinking about design ideas, while Marcus engaged with Randy. I'd signed where Marcus told me to sign, not reading the fine print, trusting my husband to look out for our interests. This time, I paid attention to every word. Randy walked us through the proposal. $45,000 for a premium floating week at their Florida property, with exchange privileges to their network of resorts. The maintenance fees were listed in tiny print at the bottom of page 7, $2,400 annually, with a clause allowing for increases as necessary to maintain property standards. Now, I know that initial investment seems steep, Randy said, his eyes locked on Marcus. He'd already identified Marcus as the decision maker. I might as well have been furniture. But break it down. You're young professionals. You'll use this for the next 30, 40 years. That's a guaranteed vacation every single year. You can't put a price on memories. Marcus was interested. I could see it in the way he leaned forward, the way his fingers drummed on the table. What's the resale value? Randy's smile flickered. These timeshares maintain their value very well. In fact, many appreciate. You're buying into a limited inventory at a premium location. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie because in my first life, I'd watched Marcus try to sell this timeshare for 6 years. He'd listed it for $30,000, then $20,000, then $10,000. Eventually, he'd tried to give it away and couldn't find a taker. The timeshare resale market was a graveyard. Properties that sold for $45,000 from the resort sold for $1 on the secondary market. If you could find a buyer willing to take on the maintenance fees, because those fees were the real trap. In my first life, they'd started at $2,400 and increased every single year. By the time I died, Marcus was paying $4,800 annually for a vacation week he never used because he was always too busy with work. The fees had special assessment clauses that let the resort charge extra for necessary improvements. They had penalties if you didn't use your week. They had exchange fees, booking fees, transaction fees. It was a financial black hole, and once you owned it, you couldn't escape. You couldn't sell it. You couldn't give it away. The only exit was to stop paying, let it go to collections, and take the credit hit. Even bankruptcy didn't always discharge the obligation. The contract had clauses that made it nearly impossible to shed. I'd watched it drain Marcus's finances for years, but in my first life, we'd bought it together. My name was on the contract too. I'd suffered alongside him. This time would be different. I don't know, I said, playing my role. It's a lot of money. Marcus, that's almost everything we have in savings. Marcus shot me an irritated look. It's an investment, babe. You need to think long term. Randy pounced on my hesitation like a shark on blood. I completely understand your concern, Mrs. Chen. It's a big decision. But let me ask you this. How much do you spend on vacations each year? We don't really take vacations, I admitted. Marcus works a lot. Exactly. Randy gestured like I'd proven his point. This will force you to take time together. You're investing in your marriage. Can you really put a price on that? I watched Marcus's face. I could see him calculating. In my first life, he'd wanted this timeshare badly. Not because he wanted to vacation. Marcus hated taking time off. but because it made him feel successful, it was a status symbol. Timeshares were for wealthy people, or at least that's what the marketing suggested. Marcus desperately wanted to be the kind of man who owned property in Florida, who had investment opportunities, who could casually mention our timeshare at business dinners. His ego was writing checks his finances couldn't cash, but he didn't know that yet. In my first life, I'd been the one to eventually manage our finances, to see the statements, to realize we were drowning. Marcus had been content to ignore the mounting fees, to let the bills pile up, to assume everything would work out because it always had. "What do you think?" Marcus asked me, but his tone made it clear he'd already decided. This was my moment. In my first life, I'd pushed back harder, worried about the cost, and Marcus had overridden my concerns but resented my negativity. We'd bought it jointly, and I'd been trapped in the financial consequences alongside him. This time, I needed to play it perfectly. I needed Marcus to want this timeshare so badly that he'd insist on having it himself. I needed to plant the seed that would grow into my freedom. I bit my lip, looking uncertain. "I think it sounds amazing, but Marcus, you should do this on your own." He blinked. "What?" "Well, you're the one who's building a business. You're the one who'll be successful enough to really use this. I'm just doing my little design thing. I don't want to hold you back by being cautious." I let my voice get smaller, more deferential. "If you believe in this investment, you should do it. Put it in your name. Your credit is so much better than mine anyway." It was poison wrapped in flattery, and I watched it work. Marcus's chest puffed up slightly. "Babe, you're being too modest." "No, really. You've always been better with money than me, better with business. I trust your judgment completely." I turned to Randy. "Is it possible to put this just in my husband's name? I don't want my credit or my finances to complicate things for him." Randy's eyes gleamed. He didn't care whose name was on the contract as long as someone signed. "Absolutely. We can structure this however you'd like." Marcus was hooked. I could see it. By suggesting he do this alone, I'd made it irresistible. It proved his superiority, his business acumen, his status as the decision maker in our marriage. It was his investment, his asset, his win. "You're sure?" he asked me. "Completely sure. This is your thing, honey. You deserve it." 20 minutes later, Marcus signed the contract. Just his name, his credit check, his financial obligation. I watched him initial each page with a flourish, watched him shake Randy's hand like they were closing a Fortune 500 deal, watched him hand over a $5,000 deposit on our credit card, his credit card, because he'd always insisted on keeping our finances separate, while still expecting me to contribute equally to household expenses. The monthly payments would be $550 for 72 months, plus the $2,400 annual maintenance fee, plus the special assessments that would start coming in year 3, plus the exchange fees, the booking fees, the administrative costs. I'd just watched my husband sign up for financial quicksand, and he thought he was making a power move. That night, Marcus was more affectionate than he'd been since our wedding night. He took me to an expensive dinner, held my hand, told me I was really maturing in my understanding of investments. I smiled and played along, the adoring wife who looked up to her brilliant husband. Inside, I was counting down. I knew what came next in my first life's timeline. I knew every betrayal, every humiliation, and I knew exactly how to ensure I'd escape them all. We returned home, and life continued its predetermined pattern. Marcus's company began using my father's manufacturing connections. I introduced Marcus to my father's business partners at dinners and golf outings, smiling graciously while Marcus took credit for relationships that only existed because of my family name. Patricia started calling me with opportunities. Could I redesign her friend's boutique hotel lobby? For exposure, of course. Could I consult on her nephew's new restaurant? He was just starting out, couldn't afford to pay, but think of the portfolio piece. Could I fly to San Francisco to stage her rental property for sale? She'd cover the flights, but not my time. After all, we were family now. In my first life, I'd said yes to everything. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, built an impressive portfolio, and never saw a dime because family helps family, and I was supposed to be grateful for the exposure. I'd watched Patricia's friends build successful businesses using my free designs, while Patricia told everyone I was dabbling in interior design as a hobby. This time, I said yes with a smile and did the bare minimum. I gave Patricia's friends generic, uninspired work. Nothing terrible enough to complain about, but nothing good enough to build on. I kept my best ideas for my paying clients, the ones who valued my work. You know, Patricia said over lunch, 3 months into my marriage, I'm a little concerned about the work you did on the hotel lobby. It's very basic. I thought you had more vision than that. I'm so sorry, Patricia. I've been trying to focus on Marcus's needs. Being a supportive wife is my priority. I let my voice tremble slightly. You're right that I'm not very talented. I should probably focus on being a better wife instead of pretending I'm a real designer. Her eyes narrowed. She wanted free labor, but she also wanted to feel superior. I'd given her the superiority, which meant she couldn't push too hard on the labor without looking petty. Well, don't be too hard on yourself, she said grudgingly. You're young. You'll improve. I wouldn't improve for her. I'd never work for her again. But she didn't need to know that yet. 4 months into my marriage, Marcus came home with news. Babe, I need to talk to you about an investment opportunity. Right on schedule. In my first life, this conversation had happened on a Tuesday in January. It was a Tuesday in January again. The universe was following the same script, which meant I could follow my new one. Of course, honey. What is it? You know how my company's growing, right? We're on the verge of something huge, but we need capital for the next phase. Real expansion. I nodded, looking interested and supportive. I was thinking about your grandmother's inheritance, the $200,000. If we invested that in the company now, in 5 years, it could be worth millions. In my first life, I'd hesitated. I'd worried. And Marcus had spent 2 weeks wearing me down, making me feel selfish for not believing in him, for not supporting his dreams, for choosing money over our partnership. Eventually, I'd signed the papers, not fully understanding what I was signing, trusting my husband to protect my interests. The money had disappeared into Chentech Solutions. Marcus had given me a 2% stake in the company, with clauses that rendered it worthless. When we divorced, that 2% was valued at $3,000. Even though the company had been acquired for $12 million just months before. The corporate structure Marcus's lawyers had created meant my shares were in a subsidiary that held no real value. I'd gotten $3,000 for my $200,000 inheritance. Marcus had gotten $4.8 million. Marcus, that's my grandmother's money, I said carefully. I know, babe, and I'm going to grow it for you. For us. For our future kids. I don't know. It feels risky. He sighed, and I could see the frustration he was trying to hide. Look, I get that you're nervous. You don't understand business like I do, but I'm asking you to trust me. I'm your husband. We're supposed to be partners. We are partners, which is why I want to keep my inheritance separate, safe. So if anything ever happens, we have a backup. His jaw tightened. If anything happens? Like what? Are you planning to divorce me? Of course not. I just meant, it sounds like you don't believe in me. It sounds like you're keeping one foot out the door. I let tears well up in my eyes. That's not fair. I do believe in you. Then prove it. This was the trap. In my first life, I'd fallen for it. This time, I was ready. Okay, I said softly. I'll think about it. For the next week, Marcus applied pressure. He was cold when I came home. He worked late more often. I knew he was with Kara, having watched their affair unfold before. He made comments about other wives who supported their husbands' visions. He had his mother call me to explain how important it was to invest in family. I played the role of the wife who was slowly breaking. I looked sad. I tried to appease him. I cooked his favorite meals and asked anxiously if he was upset with me. Finally, after 8 days of the silent treatment, I broke. Okay, I said, sitting down on the couch next to him. I'll invest the money. You're right. I should believe in you. Marcus's face transformed. Really? Babe, that's amazing. You won't regret this. But I have one condition. His smile flickered. What? I want to keep the money in my name, in my investment account. I'll invest it in the company, but the shares should be in my individual account, not joint. That way, if anything ever happens to me, the inheritance stays in my family line. I could see him calculating. The important thing to Marcus was getting the money. The details of whose account held the shares were secondary, especially since he'd already had his lawyers draft the investment documents that would make my shares worthless. "Sure," he said. "That makes sense. We can structure it however you want. And one more thing. The timeshare, I know you put that in your name, and I think that was smart. But I've been thinking, if we're going to have separate investments, maybe we should keep everything separate. That way we each have our own assets to manage." Marcus liked this idea even more than I'd expected. "You're absolutely right. It's cleaner from a tax perspective, too. You manage your investments, I'll manage mine. Perfect. So the timeshare stays completely yours. Your name, your financial responsibility, and my inheritance investment stays completely mine. Deal." We shook on it, and I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. He thought he'd won. He'd gotten access to my money while keeping the timeshare as his personal asset, his status symbol, his proof of success. He had no idea that in 3 years, the company shares he was about to give me would be worth less than the paper they were printed on, while the timeshare in his name would be an anchor dragging him toward financial ruin. 2 days later, I sat in Marcus's lawyer's office and signed the investment documents. I read every word this time. I saw the poison pills, the corporate structures that would render my shares worthless, the clauses that would let Marcus dilute my ownership to nothing. I signed anyway. Because in this life, I wasn't planning to be around for the divorce. I was planning something better. The lawyers transferred $200,000 from my inheritance account to Chen Tech Solutions. Marcus gave me stock certificates for 40,000 shares of Class B stock in CTS Holdings, LLC, a subsidiary corporation that owned the company's non-core assets. It looked impressive. It was worthless. But it was in my name. And more importantly, it wasn't tied to Marcus. That night, Marcus took me to dinner to celebrate. He ordered champagne, held my hand across the table, told me how proud he was of me for being brave enough to invest in our future. I smiled and played the happy wife. Inside, I was making calculations. I had approximately 6 months before Marcus's company would start experiencing the growth that would attract acquisition interest. I had 18 months before the timeshare maintenance fees would start increasing beyond the initial quoted amount. I had 3 years before the special assessments would begin. I just had to make it out before the trap closed. The next phase of my plan required patience. I needed to establish myself professionally in a way I'd failed to do in my first life. In my original timeline, I'd been so focused on being a supportive wife, on helping Marcus succeed, on doing free work for his family, that I'd neglected my own career. My design business had struggled because I'd given away my best work for exposure and family favors. This time, I was ruthlessly strategic. I started taking only paying clients. When Patricia called with another opportunity for free work, I was apologetic but firm. "I'm so sorry, but Marcus and I discussed it, and he thinks I should focus on building the business properly. He wants me to charge professional rates." I used Marcus's name like a shield. Patricia couldn't argue without undermining her own son's authority. She made a few more attempts, but I held firm, always framing it as Marcus's decision, Marcus's business wisdom, Marcus's desire for me to succeed professionally. Meanwhile, I poured myself into work. I knew which clients would be valuable, which projects would lead to bigger opportunities. In my first life, I'd stumbled through these early years, making mistakes, learning slowly. Now, I had the benefit of hindsight. I knew that the Williams family would renovate their entire estate in 3 years and would hire me if I made the right impression now. I knew that the boutique hotel chain Lux Metropolitan would start expanding and would need a signature designer. I knew that sustainable design would become the hot trend and that being an early adopter would pay dividends. I designed smart, worked hard, and charged what I was worth. My business grew. Not explosively. I was still only 24, still building credibility, but steadily, surely. I was laying groundwork. Marcus barely noticed. He was consumed with his company, with his affair with Kara, with playing the successful entrepreneur. He liked that I was busy. It meant I asked fewer questions about his late nights, his weekend work trips, his emotional distance. Patricia noticed, though. 6 months into my marriage, she invited me to lunch with a gleam in her eye that I recognized from my first life. She wanted something. "You're doing so well with your little business," she said in a tone that made little sound like an insult. "I'm impressed. You're actually charging people. Marcus thought it was important." "Yes, well, Marcus is very wise." She sipped her wine. "I was wondering if you might do me a favor. My friend Claire is opening a restaurant in Manhattan. Very high profile. She needs a designer and I recommended you." In my first life, this had been my big break. Claire's restaurant, Vermilion, had become one of the hottest spots in the city. I'd designed it for free, a favor to Patricia, and while it had gotten me exposure, I'd never been properly credited. Patricia had made sure of that. She'd wanted to be able to take credit for her protege's work without acknowledging that the protege had done it for nothing. "That's so kind of you to think of me," I said. "I'd love to submit a proposal. What's her budget?" Patricia blinked. "Well, I thought since she's a friend, and this could be a wonderful portfolio piece." "Of course it would be. That's why I'm happy to offer her a 10% family discount. My typical design fee for a project that size would be around $75,000, but for a friend of yours, I could do $1,500. I watched Patricia's face cycle through surprise, indignation, and calculation. In my first life, I'd done Vermilion for free and spent 3 months of my life on it. This time, I was putting a price on my time, and it was non-negotiable. "That seems quite steep for someone so early in her career," Patricia said coldly. "You're absolutely right. That's why the 10% discount. But I understand if Claire would prefer someone more established. I'm happy to refer her to some senior designers whose rates start around $150,000 for comparable work." It was a bluff based on knowledge. I knew Claire had already reached out to 2 other designers and gotten quotes in that range. I knew she was hoping for a bargain, but I also knew she was desperate. Vermilion was opening in 4 months, and she was behind schedule. Patricia's lips thinned. "I'll discuss it with Claire." 3 days later, Claire called me directly. We negotiated to $70,000, paid in installments, with a prominent credit and the ability to use the project in my portfolio. I designed Vermilion remotely this time, efficiently, giving Claire a beautiful space without sacrificing 3 months of my life to in-person handholding. When it opened, Vermilion was featured in Architectural Digest, New York Magazine, and Eater. My name was in every article. My website traffic tripled. My phone started ringing. Patricia was furious, though she couldn't say so directly. I'd done exactly what she'd asked, just not for free. I'd made her friend happy, created a successful project, and built my own reputation. There was nothing to criticize without looking petty. "Claire says you were very professional," Patricia said over our next monthly lunch, her tone suggesting this was somehow an accusation. I tried my best. I know how important her friendship is to you. "Yes, well, I suppose you're building quite a business for yourself. I'm trying to make Marcus proud." It was the magic phrase. Patricia couldn't argue with anything I did in service of making her son proud, even if what I was actually doing was building an exit strategy. 1 year into my marriage, Marcus came home with big news. "Babe, we did it. Chentech Solutions just signed a major contract with Streamline Manufacturing." Streamline Manufacturing was one of my father's partners. Marcus had spent the past year cultivating the relationship I'd introduced him to, slowly cutting me out of the picture, positioning himself as the valuable connection. I'd watched it happen in my first life. This time, I'd expected it. "That's amazing, honey. I'm so proud of you. This is going to change everything. We're projecting 300% revenue growth in the next 18 months. We might even go public." Wow. I let my eyes widen with appropriate wonder. "So does that mean my investment will be worth something?" Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Absolutely. We're all going to do very well." It was a lie. My Class B shares in the subsidiary would remain worthless. But Marcus would do very well. His Class A shares in the parent company would make him a millionaire when the acquisition happened. I played the excited, supportive wife. I cooked his favorite meal. I asked questions about the business that made me sound interested but not knowledgeable. I laughed at his jokes and told him how brilliant he was. Inside, I was watching the calendar. 18 months until the acquisition, 3 months until my exit. Because I'd planned something else. Something Marcus and Patricia would never see coming. My design business had grown beyond my first life trajectory. The Vermilion project had opened doors I'd never accessed before. I was getting calls from hotel chains, restaurant groups, boutique developers. I was building a reputation, but I was also building something else: evidence. Every email Patricia sent me asking for free work, I saved. Every text message where Marcus pressured me about the inheritance investment, I saved. Every document related to our finances, every credit card statement showing his charges at expensive hotels where he'd stayed with Kara, every piece of paper that might be useful in a divorce, I saved. In my first life, I'd filed for divorce with no preparation, no documentation, no strategy. Marcus's lawyers had buried me. I'd been so beaten down by 8 years of gaslighting and emotional abuse that I'd accepted their first settlement offer just to escape. This time, I was documenting everything, and I was building a career that would let me support myself when I left. 14 months into my marriage, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Ms. Chen, this is Robert Harrington from Lux Metropolitan Hotels. I saw your work on Vermilion, and we're expanding our boutique hotel line. We're looking for a lead designer for the entire portfolio. I'd love to discuss an opportunity with you. In my first life, this call had never come. I'd been too unknown, too unbusinesslike, too associated with free work and exposure projects. This time, I'd positioned myself perfectly. I'd be very interested in hearing more, I said. The meeting was in Boston. The offer was staggering: a 3-year contract to design 12 boutique hotels across the East Coast. The fee structure would pay me $900,000 over the life of the contract, with bonuses for early completion and positive reviews. It was more money than I'd made in my entire first life. There was just one catch. They needed someone who could start immediately and work full-time. They needed someone based in Boston or willing to travel extensively. They needed someone without significant geographic ties. I'm married, I said carefully. My husband's business is in New York. Robert nodded. We've hired married designers before. Many do the work remotely, travel when needed. Is that something your husband would support? In my first life, I would have said no immediately. I would have assumed Marcus needed me in New York. I would have put his career ahead of mine without question. This time, I paused. Can I think about it? Of course. We're hoping to have someone in place within a month. So if you could let us know within 2 weeks. I drove home from Boston with my mind racing. This was it. This was my exit. A legitimate career opportunity that would take me away from New York, away from Marcus, away from Patricia and the whole suffocating structure of my first life. I just needed to play it right. That evening, I made Marcus his favorite dinner. I poured wine. I waited until he was relaxed and pleased, fed and comfortable. Honey, I need to talk to you about something. He looked up from his phone. What's up? I got offered a job. A big one, designing a whole portfolio of boutique hotels for Lux Metropolitan. That's great, babe. Congrats. The thing is, it's based in Boston, or it requires a lot of travel, and it's full-time for 3 years. Now I had his attention. Boston? I know it's far, and I know your business is here. I was going to turn it down, but I wanted to tell you about it first. I watched the calculation happen in his eyes. In my first life, Marcus would have told me to turn it down without hesitation. He'd needed me in New York, needed my connections, my free labor for his family, my presence as the devoted wife who made him look good. But this Marcus had already extracted most of my family connections. Streamline Manufacturing was signed. My father's partners all knew Marcus directly now. And Marcus was deep in his affair with Kara. He spent more time with her than with me. Having me out of town would actually make that easier. Plus, there was his ego to consider. Having a wife with a high-profile career made him look successful. It was the kind of thing he could mention at business dinners. My wife is designing hotels for Lux Metropolitan. It sounded impressive. How much does it pay? He asked. $900,000. Over 3 years? His eyebrows rose. Seriously? Plus bonuses. It's a really prestigious contract. I could see him thinking. His company was doing well, but he wasn't pulling in that kind of money yet. Having a wife with a 6-figure contract would actually boost his status. And if I was in Boston, I couldn't ask questions about his late nights, couldn't notice the signs of his affair, couldn't be a burden on his time. "I think you should take it," he said. I let my eyes widen with surprise. Really? But we'd hardly see each other. "Babe, this is a huge opportunity. I'd be a terrible husband if I held you back. We'll make it work. You can come home on weekends. I can visit Boston sometimes. It's only 3 years." 3 years. In my first life, I'd made it 8 years before breaking. 3 years seemed like forever, but I knew better. I was planning to make it exactly 18 months, long enough to establish residency in Massachusetts, long enough to separate my life from Marcus's, long enough to be gone when his world fell apart. "Are you sure? I don't want to hurt our marriage." Marcus pulled me close, playing the supportive husband. "Our marriage is strong enough to handle this, and honestly, I'm really proud of you. You've built something real." The irony was almost too much. He was proud of me for becoming successful enough to not need him anymore. He just didn't realize that was exactly the point. "Okay," I said, letting my voice shake with emotion. "I'll take it." 2 weeks later, I signed the contract with Lux Metropolitan. 1 month after that, I moved to Boston. The apartment I rented was small, but mine, a 1-bedroom in the South End with good light and space for a home office. I didn't bring much from New York. Most of our furniture was Marcus's anyway. Chosen by his mother, paid for with his money. I took my clothes, my design materials, my laptop, and my carefully organized file of documentation showing every way Marcus and his family had used and betrayed me. Marcus helped me move with the enthusiasm of someone performing for an audience. He carried boxes, took photos for social media, posted about how proud he was of his wife's career. His followers ate it up. Marcus Chen, supportive husband, feminist ally, champion of women in business. If they'd seen his text messages to Kara, they'd have had a different opinion. "You all set, babe?" he asked after the last box was inside. "I think so. Thank you for supporting this." "Of course, we're a team." He kissed me, and I felt nothing. "I'll see you this weekend." Actually, I have to work this weekend. The first hotel project is on a tight deadline, maybe in 2 weeks. "Sure, no problem. Just let me know when you're free." He left, and I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I closed the door, locked it, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 18 months. I was free. Not completely. Not yet. But I'd taken the first step. I'd separated myself geographically, financially, professionally from Marcus Chen. Now I just had to wait for the walls to close in on him. The work for Lux Metropolitan was demanding, but fulfilling in a way my first life career had never been. I was creating something real, using my skills, getting paid what I was worth. My contact at Lux, Robert Harrington, was professional and appreciative. He treated me like a valued expert, not like a woman doing a little hobby. I threw myself into the hotel designs. Each property needed a distinct identity while maintaining brand cohesion. I worked long hours, but they were hours spent building my future, not subsidizing someone else's. Marcus and I settled into a routine of phone calls every few days and visits once or twice a month. When I went to New York, I stayed in our apartment, technically my apartment too, though Marcus had bought it before our marriage and my name wasn't on the deed. When Marcus came to Boston, he stayed for a day at most, usually claiming work emergencies that called him back. I knew he was with Kara. I'd known about Kara since my first life, and this time, I'd watched the affair unfold exactly as before. But I didn't confront him. I played the trusting wife, the woman too busy with her own career to notice her husband's betrayal. Patricia called occasionally, her voice tight with disapproval that I was so far away and not properly supporting Marcus. I let her complaints slide off me. I was in Boston. She couldn't demand free labor when I was 6 hours away. And slowly, carefully, I started building my legal case. Massachusetts had different divorce laws than New York. That was one reason I'd chosen Boston. In Massachusetts, I could file for divorce without proving fault, but if I wanted a more favorable settlement, I could file for fault-based divorce on grounds of adultery or cruel treatment. I documented everything. I took screenshots of Marcus's credit card charges at hotels where he'd stayed with Kara. I saved emails where he'd been cruel or dismissive. I noted dates and times when he'd claimed to be at work events, but was actually on vacation with his mistress. I also documented my financial contributions to the marriage. the inheritance investment, the connections I'd provided that had built his business, the fair market value of the design work I'd done for his family. In my first life, I'd gone into divorce court with nothing but anger and hurt. This time, I'd have ammunition. But I had to time it right. I needed to wait until after Chentech Solutions was acquired, because while my shares in the subsidiary were worthless, they still technically existed. And if I filed for divorce before the acquisition, Marcus's lawyers might find a way to argue that I should get nothing from the acquisition proceeds because I already had my share of the company. But if I waited until after the acquisition, until after Marcus had his $4.8 million payout, until after the acquisition agreement was finalized and he'd cashed out his shares, then his argument would be much weaker. The acquisition money would be a marital asset earned during our marriage, and I'd be entitled to a portion. More importantly, I'd be filing in Massachusetts, where I'd established residency. Massachusetts had more equitable divorce laws than New York, and judges there looked more favorably on claims of financial manipulation and adultery. I just had to wait. And while I waited, I watched the timeshare fees start to climb. In month 18 of our marriage, Marcus's first annual maintenance fee came due. I was in Boston when he called, frustrated. "Babe, did you see this bill from the timeshare? It's $2,400. "Oh, honey, I thought you knew it would be that much. That was in the original contract." "Yeah, but I thought we'd actually use it. We haven't taken a single vacation there." "Well, you're so busy with the company, and I'm busy with the hotels. Maybe next year?" He grumbled, but paid it. $2,400 was annoying, but not yet ruinous. He didn't know about the escalation clause. He didn't know that next year it would be $2,650, and the year after that it would be $2,900. He didn't know about the special assessments that would start coming in year 3. The timeshare was a slow-acting poison, and Marcus had no idea he'd been infected. Month 24 of my marriage was when Chentech Solutions got serious acquisition interest. Marcus called me, ecstatic. "Babe, we've got 3 companies looking at us. This is really happening." "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. One of them is talking about a $15 million valuation. Can you believe it? Everything we've worked for is paying off." Everything we've worked for. I noted the phrase. Marcus had a way of erasing my contributions while claiming joint credit for his successes. It would look great in divorce filings. "You've worked so hard," I said carefully. "You deserve this. We deserve this. You and me, we're a team." "Of course we are," but I heard the lie in his voice. Marcus thought of himself as a solo performer. I was just a supporting character in his success story. He'd already mentally spent that acquisition money on himself. The car he'd buy, the apartment he'd upgrade to, the lifestyle he'd finally be able to afford. He had no idea that in 6 months, I'd be taking half of it. The acquisition talks dragged on for 4 months. During that time, I established deeper roots in Boston. I joined a local design collective. I networked with Massachusetts attorneys. Casually, as if I was just being social, but carefully noting which ones specialized in complex divorce cases involving business assets. I also started documenting Marcus's spending. His credit card bills showed an interesting pattern. Expensive dinners for 2 at romantic restaurants, hotel stays that didn't correspond with business trips I knew about, shopping charges at women's clothing stores that were definitely not buying anything for me. I took screenshots of everything. I built a timeline. I created a file folder that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. And I waited. Month 28 of my marriage, the acquisition finally happened. Chentech Solutions was purchased by a major tech conglomerate for $14.2 million. Marcus owned 42% of the company. His payout, after taxes and legal fees, was approximately $4.8 million. He called me from the closing, drunk on champagne and victory. "We did it, babe! We're millionaires!" "That's incredible, Marcus. I'm so happy for you. For us. This is for both of us. How much will my shares be worth?" Pause. Let me check with the lawyers. The subsidiary structure is a little complicated, but you'll definitely see something from this." He was lying. He'd already run the numbers. He knew my shares were worth less than $5,000. He just didn't want to tell me yet. Didn't want to ruin his celebration with my disappointment. I trust you to handle it, I said sweetly. You're the best, babe. I couldn't have done this without you. Another lie, but this one was documented in dozens of emails where he'd praised my connections, my introductions, my support. This lie would be useful in court. 2 weeks after the acquisition, I got the official valuation of my Class B shares in CTS Holdings, LLC. They were worth $3,200. Marcus delivered the news over dinner in New York, where I'd come for the weekend. He looked uncomfortable, almost sheepish. So, I talked to the lawyers about your shares. The structure is really complicated, but basically, the subsidiary holding company wasn't part of the acquisition. What does that mean? It means your shares didn't appreciate the same way mine did. You're getting $3,200. I let my face fall. But I invested $200,000. I know, babe. I know. But that was a risky investment. Not all investments pay off. But yours did. You're getting almost $5 million. His jaw tightened. That's different. Those were Class A shares in the parent company. Different risk profile, different structure. The lawyers can explain it if you want. I don't understand. How can I invest $200,000 and get back $3,000 when you're getting millions? Because you invested in the wrong part of the company. Look, I didn't structure the deal this way to screw you over. This is just how corporate finance works. It was gaslighting of the purest form. He'd absolutely structured the deal to screw me over. His lawyers had designed the share structure specifically to ensure that my investment would be worthless while his would flourish. But he was framing it as my ignorance, my failure to understand how corporate finance works. In my first life, I'd believed him. I'd felt stupid for not understanding. I'd accepted the $3,200 and felt grateful I'd gotten anything at all. This time, I had documentation. I had emails where Marcus had promised the investment would benefit both of us equally. I had the original term sheet that he'd never shown me in my first life, where the corporate structure was clearly designed to separate his valuable shares from my worthless ones. I had evidence of the fraud, but I didn't show my hand. Not yet. I see, I said quietly. I guess I should have understood better. Marcus relaxed. Hey, don't beat yourself up. You're not a business person. That's okay. Look, I'm going to get a huge payout. We're going to be fine. We'll use this money to buy a house, to travel, to do all the things we've dreamed about. That's generous of you. It's not generous. We're married. What's mine is yours. Another lie. But he didn't know I knew it was a lie. He didn't know I'd already consulted with 3 Massachusetts divorce attorneys. He didn't know I'd mapped out exactly how the next 6 months would go. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. That night, he took me to an expensive restaurant to celebrate. He ordered a $500 bottle of wine and told me about his plans, the new apartment he wanted to buy, the Tesla he was going to order, the investments he was considering. I noticed everything was I, not we. I smiled and nodded and played the supportive wife. And I made my own plans. The next morning, I returned to Boston. I didn't go back to New York for 3 weeks. When Marcus called, I was always busy with work, apologetic but firm. I was establishing a pattern. We were living separate lives, connected only by occasional phone calls and rare visits. Massachusetts law required 12 months of residency to file for divorce. I'd moved to Boston in month 14 of my marriage. It was now month 29. I had to wait just 2 more months. During those 2 months, several things happened. First, Marcus bought a new apartment in Manhattan, a penthouse in Tribeca, $2.8 million, all in his name. He called it our apartment, but the deed said otherwise. In Massachusetts divorce court, this would be very interesting. A major purchase made with acquisition proceeds, without consulting his spouse, without putting her name on the deed. Second, the timeshare annual maintenance fee arrived. This time it was $2,750, an increase of 10.4%, plus a special assessment of $800 for resort improvements. Marcus called furious. This is ridiculous. The fee was supposed to be $2,400. There was a clause about increases, I reminded him gently, for property maintenance. And what the hell is this $800 special assessment? Pool renovation, I think? It should have been in the letter. This is a scam. I'm going to sell this thing. That's probably a good idea, honey. I didn't tell him that the timeshare resale market was a graveyard. I didn't tell him that he'd listed it for $30,000 in my first life and couldn't find a buyer. I didn't tell him that the contract had clauses making it nearly impossible to transfer ownership without the resort's permission, and the resort would never give permission because they made their money on the annual fees. Marcus tried to sell the timeshare. He listed it for $40,000. He'd paid $40,000, so surely he could recoup most of his investment. He got 0 offers. He dropped the price to $30,000. Still nothing. He dropped it to $20,000. One inquiry from someone who wanted to know if Marcus would pay them to take over the fees. Marcus was beginning to understand that he'd been scammed, but it was too late. The contract was ironclad. He could either keep paying the fees, or he could default, let it go to collections, and destroy his credit score right when he was trying to qualify for mortgages on his new real estate investments. He kept paying. Third, I completed my first 2 hotel projects for Lux Metropolitan. They were featured in Travel Plus Leisure and Condé Nast Traveler. My reputation was growing. I was getting calls from other hotel chains, from restaurant groups, from developers. My career was thriving in a way it never had in my first life. I was becoming financially independent. That was crucial for what came next. Month 30 of my marriage, I filed for divorce. I did it in Massachusetts, where I'd established residency. I filed on grounds of cruel treatment and adultery. I included a 47-page filing documenting Marcus's affair with Kara, his fraudulent handling of my inheritance investment, the free labor I'd provided to his family, and his unilateral purchase of a $2.8 million apartment with marital funds without my consent. I attached 127 pages of supporting documentation. Emails, credit card statements, photographs, text messages, everything I'd been collecting for the past 2.5 years. I had Marcus served with the divorce papers at his office, where he was in a meeting with potential investors. Maximum embarrassment, maximum impact. He called me 20 minutes later screaming, "What the fuck is this?" "It's a divorce filing, Marcus. I thought that was obvious." "You're divorcing me? Now? After everything I've done for you? After everything you've done to me, you mean?" "I gave you everything. I supported your career. I let you move to Boston. You committed fraud with my inheritance. You cheated on me for our entire marriage. And you bought a penthouse without even telling me. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Silence. "Then, you can't prove any of that." "I have credit card statements showing hotel stays with Kara. I have emails where you admitted the corporate structure was designed to separate our investments. I have documentation of every dime I'm owed. Try me." More silence. I could practically hear his lawyer brain kicking in, running calculations. "We can work this out," he said, his voice shifting to conciliatory. "We don't need to do this in court. We can settle." "Oh, we're absolutely going to court, and I'm going to get what I'm owed." "You signed a prenup." "I signed a prenup you fraudulently modified without my knowledge. Read page 12 of my filing. My lawyer thinks that's going to be a fun conversation." It was a bluff. Sort of. The prenup modification was legally gray. Marcus's lawyer had technically disclosed the changes, just in a way that was deliberately confusing. But my lawyer thought we had a decent chance of getting it thrown out, especially in Massachusetts, which took a dim view of this kind of financial manipulation. Even if we didn't get the prenup thrown out entirely, we had strong claims about the acquisition proceeds being marital property, about the fraudulent investment structure, about the apartment purchase. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How much do you want?" "I want 50% of the acquisition proceeds. I want the fraudulent investment made whole. I want compensation for the 3 years of free design work I did for your family. And I want you to keep the timeshare." "The timeshare? Why the hell would I keep the timeshare?" "Because it's in your name, Marcus. It was always in your name. Your investment, your decision, your responsibility. I had nothing to do with it." I heard him intake a sharp breath. He'd just realized what I'd done. By keeping the timeshare in his name only, by making it his separate property, I'd ensured it wouldn't be considered a marital asset. He couldn't make me take on half the liability. It was entirely his burden, and it was a burden that would cost him approximately $3,000 to $1,500 per year, and growing for the next 30 years. Unless he could find a way out, which he couldn't. "You bitch," he said softly. "Call me whatever you want. See you in court." I hung up. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. Marcus fought me on everything. He hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that my career success was due to his support, that the acquisition proceeds were his separate property because they came from his company, that I'd understood the investment structure perfectly well and made a calculated decision. My lawyer destroyed every argument. We had emails where Marcus had pressured me into the investment. We had the original term sheet showing the fraudulent structure. We had documentation of my family connections that had built his business, connections he'd never acknowledged or compensated me for. We had credit card statements proving the affair, hotel stays that clearly showed a pattern of deception. The Massachusetts judge was not impressed with Marcus Chen. During discovery, some beautiful facts came to light. Marcus had spent $47,000 of acquisition proceeds on jewelry for Kara. He'd bought her a car, he'd rented her an apartment, all while we were still married, all with what was legally marital property. My lawyer added those to the pile of evidence. Patricia tried to intervene. She called me, her voice icy. "You're destroying my son's life over money. I thought you were better than this." "Your son committed fraud, Patricia. He cheated on me. He used me and my family for his business, then discarded me when I was no longer useful. I'm not destroying his life. I'm getting what I'm owed." "After everything we did for you?" "You mean after everything I did for you. I designed 6 properties for you and your friends for free. The fair market value of that work was $340,000. It's itemized in my filing. Would you like to write me a check, or should I add you to the lawsuit?" She hung up. The settlement came down in month 38 of my marriage, or 8 months after I filed. The judge ruled largely in my favor. I got $2.1 million from the acquisition proceeds, representing half of Marcus's net payout after taxes, $175,000 for the fraudulent investment, my $200,000 inheritance, less the $3,200 payout, plus interest and penalties, $280,000 for documented free labor provided to Marcus's family and business contacts, $50,000 in attorney's fees, full ownership of my design business and all assets associated with it. My car, my personal property, my freedom. Marcus got the remaining $2.7 million from his acquisition proceeds, minus what he'd already spent on Kara and the penthouse. His company stock and business assets, the Tribeca penthouse, which he had to mortgage to pay my settlement, his car, his personal property, the timeshare in Orlando, that. Last line in the settlement agreement was my favorite. The Orlando timeshare property, being separate property held solely in respondent's name, shall remain the sole property and responsibility of respondent. Marcus's lawyer had tried to argue it should be split. My lawyer had gleefully pointed out that Marcus had specifically kept it in his name only, had specifically structured it as his separate investment, and had documentation showing he'd wanted sole ownership. The judge agreed. The timeshare was Marcus's problem. I signed the divorce decree with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt since my first life's car accident. I was free. I was financially secure. I had a thriving career. I had my whole life ahead of me. Marcus tried to call me after the settlement was finalized. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But I did keep tabs on him, in the casual way you might check an ex's social media. I was curious to see how the timeshare played out. Year 1. Post-divorce, Marcus tried again to sell the timeshare. He listed it for $5,000. No takers. He listed it for $1,000. Someone inquired, then backed out when they saw the maintenance fees. He tried to give it away on Craigslist. Even that didn't work. The moment people saw the $3,500 plus annual fees, they ran. Year 2, the maintenance fees hit $3,050, plus a $200 special assessment for hurricane damage to the resort. Marcus tried to refuse to pay the special assessment. The resort's lawyer sent him a letter explaining that the contract required payment, and failure to pay would result in collections action and credit damage. He paid. Year 3, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus was having financial trouble. The penthouse had been a stretch even with the acquisition money. His new startup was burning cash. And the timeshare fees, now $4,100 annually, were a constant drain. He tried to let the timeshare go to collections, thinking he'd just take the credit hit. But the contract had a clause allowing the resort to pursue a deficiency judgment. They sued him for the unpaid fees plus penalties. He was stuck. Year 4, the fees were $4,500. Marcus was paying for a vacation property he never used, couldn't sell, couldn't give away, and couldn't escape. Every year the fees increased. Every year, special assessments appeared for pool renovations, lobby updates, hurricane repairs, landscaping improvements. The timeshare contract was for perpetuity. It never ended. And when Marcus died, the obligation would pass to his estate. His heirs, if he had any, would inherit the debt. He'd signed up for a lifetime of financial burden, and there was no escape. Meanwhile, my life flourished. The Lux Metropolitan contract led to other opportunities. I became a sought-after hotel designer, then expanded into residential design for high-end clients. My business grew into a firm with 12 employees. I bought a brownstone in Boston. I traveled for pleasure, not for work obligations or timeshare presentations. I dated casually at first, then seriously. I met someone who treated me with respect, who valued my career, who didn't gaslight me or cheat or use me for connections. We got married in my second marriage's 5th year, or my first life's 10th year, depending on how you counted. I never forgot the lesson the timeshare taught me. Read every contract, trust your instincts, and never let someone else control your financial destiny. But mostly, I never forgot the sweet satisfaction of watching Marcus Chen drown in maintenance fees while I lived free. 10 years after my rebirth, I got a LinkedIn message from Marcus. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Claire, I know we haven't spoken since the divorce. I'm reaching out because I'm in a difficult situation, and I thought you might be willing to help. The timeshare has become a serious financial burden. The fees are over $6,000 a year now, and I can't sell it. I know you encouraged me to get it back then, and I thought maybe you'd be willing to take on half the obligation. We were married when I bought it, and even though the divorce decree said it was mine, I think it's only fair that we share this burden. I'm not asking for money, just for you to take over half the ownership and fees. Please consider it. I'm really struggling here. I read it twice, marveling at the audacity. He was rewriting history, claiming I'd encouraged him to buy the timeshare. He was ignoring the divorce decree that explicitly made it his sole responsibility. He was trying to manipulate me one more time, appealing to my sense of fairness and guilt. In my first life, it might have worked. I might have felt sorry for him. I might have wondered if I owed him something. This time, I knew better. I didn't respond. I simply blocked his profile and deleted the message. The timeshare was his burden to bear. The maintenance fees were his cross to carry. And after everything he'd put me through, the fraud, the cheating, the gaslighting, the 8 years of my first life spent serving his ambitions, I didn't feel even a flicker of guilt. I had died at 32 and been given a second chance. I'd used that chance to escape, to build a real life, to protect myself from the people who'd used me. And I'd used it to give Marcus exactly what he deserved, a lifetime of increasing maintenance fees on a worthless timeshare that he could never, ever escape. Sometimes revenge isn't explosive. Sometimes it's not dramatic. Sometimes revenge is just letting someone keep exactly what they thought they wanted and watching as they slowly realize it's destroying them. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and toasted my past self. The woman who died in a car accident with divorce papers in her bag, who never got to see justice.
Anyone who can do this kind
This
of
time,
thing with
I'd lived,
it's just
and I'd
always so
won.
the like expression
timeshare would
of
outlive us
your
both.
form
An
is always just so
eternal
impressive
monument
to me.
to Marcus's greed and my
You're
perfect
amazing.
revenge. And every year, like clockwork, the maintenance fees would come due.
All right, do the missing teeth have meaning? Good question. Had the pleasure of watching someone steal a friend's brakeless bike before he crashed hard. Fucking karmic justice immediately. I love that. McButt, thank you. Oh, and thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I'm really enjoying them. I've got a lot to do on this, but it's fine. My dad came to drive me back, offered to hit him with his car if we found him. 10 out of 10. Thank you, Dad. Okay. Let's see. I heed not that my earthly lot hath little of earth in it, that years of love have been forgot in the hatred of a minute. I mourn not that the desolate are happier, sweet than I, but that you sorrow for my fate, who am a passer-by. Aww. I mourn not that the desolate are happier sweet than I, but that you sorrow for my fate, who am a passer-by. Oh, welcome back, Gwyn. I have human teeth here in my desk. You can, Oh, can you dream? Good to know. Forbidden snacks. Crunchy little morsels. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your work, as always, as ever. You're incredible. I hope all will go follow and go enjoy. Saving up for the tooth fairy. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Could have saved me points if you read it. Well, I couldn't read it. I was passing it out. I was reading. I'm not good. Gonna lurk and oh, good. Okay. What was today? I wanted a kneecap, but everyone I live with has banned me from haunting our house. 100%. That's honestly smart. Rudo! Rudo's a freaking day one in this stream. How are you, Rudo? I'm sorry stream was bugged. That's so annoying. Hi. Seth, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Today's a photo of my friend's Australian shepherd named Alma.
Want Betty now?
McButt! Thank you. 1,000 biddies. Thank you, McButt. Hi, Christos. McButt hype. Thank you, Angel. Drawing every day for the past week, not progressing at all. That's okay. You know what? You might not even see progress, Rudo. But what'll happen is you'll look back in like a month or 2 or 3 or 12 and you'll say, oh my God, progress. It's not always visible, but the fact that you're doing it is so fucking amazing. A week is no time at all. Hi, dwarf. Okay, Aaron, get on out of here. Thank you again so much. You're wonderful. Every stroke is progress. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can pinpoint a year by looking at my art and how it looked at that point. Yes. Yeah. Oh, dwarf, it's so cozy. Look at this. Fuzzy. Fuzzy. This is Beautiful Bastard is the brand. I don't know if they sell it anymore. It's just a mustached man. They kind of cycle through styles. No, not short sleeves. No, oh, that's it. I guess that's all. They don't have much on there at the moment. Making things is so good for you. It's so true. There's a mug with great tits. Yes! Rudo, there is. There is. Took me a week just to learn how pencil works. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yes, stuffed animal. Yeah. Well, this is Flick Puckwudgie. Flick Puckwudgie, a master of jokes and pranks. Flick thinks it's playtime all year round. I'm well. I hope you are too. All I feel is rage. Whoa. Oh, they got some fucking political shit on here right now. All right. It's good stuff. Okay. Flick? No, I didn't name him. I didn't name him. Not my choice. Just so you know. Thank you very much.